Welcome, Sunday morning of pre-Pesach week. And the big thing with which we start is Hungary. And this is worth another word. Our left-wing media, whether you're living in Israel, it's identical, Israel and America. We have people in our class from both. And the left-wing media, identical in both countries, lie and distort the news. So you understand that Netanyahu in Israel is a tyrant who is in the process of taking away democracy by firing Ronen Bar from their FBI, the Shin Bet, and trying to fire Gali Baharav Miara, the Attorney General. And that makes him a dictator, taking away the constitutional democracy from a country that doesn't even have a constitution. When in fact, if that's so dictatorial in America, Trump fired an FBI agent. Nobody called that dictatorial. For all the things that the Democrats accused him with and 2 impeachments, no one ever said that he violated liberties when he fired James Comey. And more recently, the next guy, Christopher Wray. He fired the heads of the FBI. That's how you do it. The president needs the FBI's total loyalty. In the same way, there's nothing wrong with Netanyahu firing Ronen Bar. It's the two. It's the same. And then the 2 medias say that freedom is on the line. The power-crazy dictators are taking over. Likewise, Trump fired his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, because Sessions was not tough enough, had nothing to do with freedom. And he fired Jeff Sessions. So the chief executive can fire the Attorney General. But the point is that in Israel, they clutch at any straw they can to be left-wing and accuse Netanyahu of being a right-winger. Not just a right-winger, but actually a dictator. And if you're in the United States, there's nothing to talk about Trump derangement syndrome. And the reason I start with that is that we in America know this very well from our side of the spectrum, which is the majority in the last election. And Israelis know this very well from the right side of that spectrum, which also is the majority of that spectrum, as proven in the last Democratic election, and all the last for the 50 years that have been before that. So I mention this because from time to time we read about right-wing dictators in Europe or elsewhere, and you develop a sense, let's say Viktor Orban of Hungary, who constantly is referred to as a right-wing thug like Mussolini. And what do we know about Hungary? We know America if we live here. We know Israel as Americans. We're very involved. Israelis know Israel. Israelis know about America because there's such a strong link and weapons and support. None of us really knows what's going on in Hungary or some of these other right-wing democracies. But what we know is that the media refer to them as dictators because they do the kinds of things Trump and Netanyahu do. And we know that whatever you want to say about Trump and Netanyahu, and there is plenty to criticize, they're not dictators. And they are constitutionalists. Trump has like a bunch of Obama judges unconstitutionally preventing him from getting anything done. And he obeys the courts. Stalin would arrest all these guys. Hitler would kill these judges. Trump respects them. Netanyahu, same exact thing, but they live with it. Now they're trying to change things in the courts. Netanyahu with court reform, and Trump is trying to get the Supreme Court to talk about this insanity of local Obama judges imposing nationwide injunctions. That's what they're trying to do, but they're not dictators. They're trying to get something changed to get the system more fair. I mention this because this week, a major highlight of this week's news is that Netanyahu went to Hungary, where he was received by Viktor Orban, not the dictator of Hungary, but the democratically elected president of Hungary or prime minister, whatever he is. And the Israeli left likes to point out that Netanyahu tries to ally Israel with dictatorships, right-wing dictatorships, and move Israel away from friendly liberal governments like England and France. But the fact is, as we know in America, the friendly liberals are the ones that embargo Israel militarily when her life is on the line, cut off weapons, vote condemnations against Israel, say that they will honor the International Criminal Court and arrest warrants against Netanyahu. Those are our friends like Britain and France and Italy and all those wonderful liberal democracies, just as here in the United States, all the anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism of substance is from the liberal Democrats. It was a liberal Democrat, Bernie Sanders, who just brought up a resolution this past week calling for an embargo of something like 88, whatever billion amount of dollars worth of military equipment that Trump is now going to send Israel. So the right-wing dictator Trump is trying to send Israel these weapons that Israel paid for. And the liberal Democrat, Bernie Sanders, is trying to get an embargo. And the media depict one as a liberal, and there are all these Jews out there who believe we should be allied with the liberals and the Democrats. And they just voted in the Senate, and the vote was every single Republican said send the weapons to Israel. 15 out of 47 Democrats, 1/3, said embargo Israel. Now, on the one hand, let's focus on the good. If 47 Democrats, 32 said send the weapons to Israel, that means 2/3 of the liberal Democrats support Israel. But 15 Democrats, Chris Van Hollen, whom I always mention, the number one anti-Semite from Maryland in the Senate, and Elizabeth Warren, all your favorite liberal Democrats, all voted to embargo Israel just this week. So in the same way, well, Britain and France not only turned their back on Israel, but are ready to send Netanyahu off to be arrested and embargo weapons, and are at the forefront of forcing Israel to send money and to send food into Gaza. It's people like Viktor Orban, a Democrat, a constitutionalist, someone who follows the law, who has been supporting Israel throughout. So I want to point that out because I could easily just show you, which I will now, how Netanyahu was received in Hungary. But I want us to understand, because there's so much lies in the media, and you hear that he's just cuddling up to dictators. Quite the contrary. He's cuddling up to dictators like himself and Trump. That is to say, actually, true Democrats, true respecters of democracy. And he's turning away from leftists who will not stand with Israel. We don't need them. They're not worth it. They're counterproductive. If all they're doing is forcing us to tie our hands while Israel's fighting in Gaza, forcing them to send them stuff and all of that. Let's get going. We begin today with Prime Minister Netanyahu going to Hungary, which is risky, but he trusted Orban because if he sets foot, there is an arrest warrant throughout the world that was put up by the International Criminal Court, calling him an international criminal who has to be put on trial for genocide. And to go to any country, he's got to be sure they're not going to arrest him on the spot. And Orban said, not only will we not arrest you, but Hungary is announcing this week that we are quitting the International Criminal Court. And there are seven other right-wing governments, democracies, that now are going to be quitting the International Court. While the Prime Minister of England and France, Macron, have said they would arrest Netanyahu. Nothing personal, but there's an arrest warrant. We'd have to arrest him. This is Netanyahu arriving in Hungary. And that's the equivalent of Air Force One. That's his wife, Sarah. That is Viktor Orban, the president of Hungary, I believe. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's their foreign minister, I'm not sure. So he was greeted. No, that's not Orban. I guess he'll meet Orban later. So these are major dignitaries, probably from his cabinet. And that's how he was being greeted. at the airport in Hungary. Respectfully with a red carpet. Here, he's being welcomed formally in Budapest by Viktor Orban. This is reviewing the troops. And this is called reviewing the troops. This is what happens in a state visit with any two countries.
Thank you, Prime Minister Orban. Thank you, Victor. This is a very moving day for me. I remembered on the flight here that I came here in 1991 as a Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel to reestablish the relations between Hungary and Israel. I didn't know very much about Hungary at the time. I knew Puskás, Guláš, Zsa Gabor, and some knowledge of Hungarian history, your struggles. You had exited the ravages of World War II, only to be under a new type of occupation. And it took you many decades to liberate yourself and establish Hungary as an independent country. So that offered some similarity to our travails, which were on a different scale. A third of our people were murdered in World War II, in the Holocaust. We had to overcome great odds to reestablish our sovereignty in our ancient homeland. And it was a question of time when these two histories would meet and begin the great alliance that is now developed. You have in your leadership, have done remarkable things for Israel and the Jewish people. You support Israel proudly, unstintingly. You stand with us at the EU. You stand with us at the UN. And you've just taken a bold and principled position on the ICC, and I thank you, Victor. This is not only important for us, it's important for all democracies. It's important to stand up to this corrupt organization that has equated a democracy that is challenged for its very existence by the most horrific terroristic powers on earth. But the ICC directs its actions against us, fighting a just war with just means, and of course not against our tormentors, not really. This is important for all of us, for all of civilization, as we fight this battle against barbarism. And you are the first, I dare to say, I don't think the last, but the first state that walks out of this this corruption and this rottenness. And I think it'll be deeply appreciated not only in Israel, but in many, many countries around the world. You've taken a very bold stance against anti-Semitism that has reared its head, as you said, in Europe. You don't allow it, you don't tolerate it. You recognize that anti-Semitism today is masked by the guise of anti-Zionism. You adopted the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, which says that if you're against the Jewish state, you're anti-Semitic. You can't say, well, I'm not against Hungarians, I just don't think there should be a Hungary. I'm not against Jews, I just don't think there should be a Jewish state. That's what these anti-Semites are doing. And without a Jewish state, there's no Jewish people. So your position on anti-Semitism, both inside Hungary and outside Hungary, is one that others should adopt as well. You treat the Jewish community, as you said, in an exemplary fashion, and you seek to provide it not only with its security, but also the ability to conduct Jewish life here in the best possible way. Perhaps some of our Israeli guests here don't know, but Hungary also takes care today of Israel's football teams, because they have to practice somewhere. They have to play outside. Hungary enables them to play here, and so other sports as well.
It's a great speech. I'm going to move forward because of time, and I want to amplify on what he just said. Might not be clear. We in America, it's such a big country that all of our sports leagues are within America, with a little bit of Canada. So baseball, you have, I don't know, you have 30 teams, and same thing more or less with football and basketball, and so many different cities. So you have like 30 competing teams, let's say, competing all season until they reach the championships. But out in Europe, it's a different situation in many countries. On the one hand, they'll have their, like England, with many of us that saw Ted Lasso, learned that England has a number of cities that compete in, let's say, in their soccer or football league. But they also have a thing where each country in Europe and the Middle East has a national team, and those national teams compete for an international championship. And Israel competes. And we've unfortunately seen in previous Sundays where an Israeli soccer team went to France or went to Holland and riots broke out because Israel's soccer team was there for a league game. What often happens is that Israel's team is overseas for 1 or 2 or 3 league games, maybe in France and maybe in England and maybe in Ireland and maybe in whatever. And many of those countries will not let Israel, their national team, play. So the league requires a country to play Israel, and that country refuses, they'll play Israel, but they refuse to let the Israeli team into their country. But they're willing to play Israel somewhere else, not in their own country. Otherwise, they would be considered forfeit, and they would get a loss in their league. So he's pointing out that when Israel needs a place for their soccer team to play another country that won't let them in that country, Orban allows those games to be played in Hungary. This is especially important for another reason, because you have a lot of Jews on the left, and they'll say, Well, look at Netanyahu. He's such a dictator. He's such a Mussolini himself. He actually could hang around with the head of a country that was part of the Nazi alliance. And the response is, first of all, Hungary was occupied by the Nazis. And yes, Netanyahu cannot say it. I can say it. We all can say it. There were a lot of Hungarians that were all too happy to do Nazi stuff during the war, as in other countries, Romania, and we could go through the list. Yes, when the Nazis occupied a country, it wasn't only Germans who did this stuff. They had no trouble finding locals delighted to be part of it. France during the Vichy government as well. But to go around saying that 75 years later, the state of Israel should refuse ever to accept Hungary's support, political support in the International Criminal Court, the United Nations, etc., and should be only limited to accepting the support of countries that were not part of the Nazi Reich. It's insane. And Israel needs to find her support where she can find it. And it's a very important concept to have in mind and just to understand for ourselves. And every so often the subject comes up. It's important to know. Okay. This is walking along the Danube in Budapest.
Ő is mire bome vorák lólam volme májó is borák is tarak is pohár srájma mica se visszadar visszalé visszalól söméde kucsobriku.
So these are just a little bit of insights into what goes on in an Israeli prime minister's state visit outside of Israel. So there's always some kind of wreath laying in memory of those who died during the Holocaust. And now Netanyahu is about to be presented with a To'ar, Mikabel To'ar, doctor, Shel Kavod. He's about to receive an honorary doctorate, Lamanhigut, in leadership, Meha Università ציבורית Budapest, from the Public University in Budapest. Okay.
I invite His Excellency, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, to receive his award certificate from the rector.
You honor me with an honorary degree based on leadership. Now, leadership is a difficult thing to quantify and to define. So I had a question about leadership from my father. My late father was a historian of the Jewish people and a university professor. And I asked him before I became prime minister, I said, well, what is the most important thing that I have to have in order to lead our country? And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, I have to have a vision. I have to have also the flexibility and determination, the combination of the two to navigate, to achieve that vision. Because as Immanuel Kant said, you know, nothing can straighten the crooked timber of humanity. He said, it's always, you can't come with a buzzsaw. He said, well, that's true. But that's true of anything. It's true if you're a business leader. It's true if you're a military leader, if you're an academic leader. You need vision and flexibility. But there's one thing you must have if you want to lead this country. And then he said, and I said, so what's that? And he had one word, which surprised me. He said, you have to have education. You have to be deeply and broadly educated. Otherwise, he said, you'll be at the mercy of your clerks. It's called the deep state. Otherwise, you'll be at the mercy of your clerks. So you must have education. And education has been a value for the Jews in Hungary.
Okay, now this is going to be a quick segue, unrelated to anything else, but part of a very big thing in the past week in Israel. Israel, as you heard at the very, very end of his speech, he was talking about the deep state. This is the new insight that conservatives have had both in Israel and America. We're living parallel lives. It's become more and more clear to conservatives in America that America is governed by the deep state. And really, Trump is the last chance for conservatives, because if he's not strong enough to do something about the deep state, no one is. And it's over. And it's the same with Israel. What do we mean by the deep state? The majority of voters vote conservative to elect a conservative, let's say Republican. And he comes to office with an agenda that he promised in the campaign that the voters chose, and he finds he can't get his agenda done. So the question is, why can't he get it done? Is he incompetent? Is he lazy? And he starts to learn about the deep state, that with or without elections, the newspapers, the TV news, cable news, that's independent, that's private, with their reporters and their directors and their writers and their journalists, no matter what happened in the election, and they're all on the left. So they're subverting what the voters voted for, but that's just the media. And then it turns out the judicial system is top heavy with left-wing judges, Obama judges, Biden judges. And so if the elected president issues executive orders and other initiatives, let's say the people voted to throw out illegal aliens, all the more so convicted murderers. So that's what the people voted for. The president comes in, he gives the order, I'm going to keep my promise that you voted for, and I promised you. And it turns out he can't do it because all the Obama judges stop him. Or I'm going to block the wall. The Obama judge, you can't do that. Well, we're going to throw out those Arab terrorist supporters at Harvard and Columbia. And well, the judges said, well, you can't do that. Well, we're going to fire people. We're going to cut down the size of the bureaucracy. Well, you can't do that. So it turns out the people go to vote. They think they're having a free election. They're donating money both ways. They're struggling. Their hearts, they're up all night election night. Will our side win? Will our side win? And then it turns out it doesn't matter, because even when you win, you can't. The country's already in the hands of the deep state, between the judges and the academicians who are going to take your children in college and the universities and corrupt them, and the news media. You don't have, and then on top of it, the last thing, the clerks. That's what he referred to. When you come in, there's already a landed professional body of workers. The State Department has thousands of people who work in the State Department. When there's an election, they don't all leave. Only the Secretary of State leaves. And changes. Everybody else stays the same. They're officially nonpartisan, but they are. So what they do is when the president says, I want you to do this, they just slow walk it for 4 years and they don't do it. They do it very slowly. They do it wrong until their guy is in, and then they can speed up again and get the work done. And we just saw this with the FBI. The FBI is supposed to be nonpartisan. When Trump is there, they're running lawsuits against them all over the country. Whereas if Hillary burned subpoenaed documents, emails, she never was prosecuted. Hunter Biden got away with it. Everybody got away with it. So that's the deep state. So what you have is Israel's got exactly the same problem. People did not appreciate it in America 15 years ago, and they did not appreciate the depth of it in Israel until the last few years. They've got Netanyahu on trial the way they deep state did to Trump. They've got Netanyahu on trial for at least 4 different things that are all nonsense and bogus, just as what they did with Trump. And they sabotage item by item. Every time the Knesset, which is majority conservative, passes a law, the Attorney General does not answer to the government. In America, the Attorney General is appointed by the president and can be fired by the president. In Israel, the Attorney General gets appointed by the Knesset, and then you can't stop her. And she's out of control, and she single-handedly subverts every single thing the government does. So finally, now they're trying to fire her. So what did the left do? They went to the Supreme Court, which is also the left wing. And how left wing? The justices on the Supreme Court, when they're ready to retire, they appoint their successors. There's a committee that has some other people too, but the notion, can you imagine if every time a Supreme Court justice in America steps down, the successor is decided by Sotomayor, Ketanji, and Elena Kagan. Imagine, and then nominally they give you one Roberts. So what kind of system is that? It's self-perpetuating. You could never get the other viewpoint. So I give you all this because the country is more and more becoming aware of it. 2 things blew up in the last 2-3 weeks that really have turned the deep state debate more intense. Number 1, Netanyahu tried to fire Ronen Bar, the head of the FBI in Israel, which is the Shin Bet, or Shabak, or in English, the ISA. And the guy refuses to be fired. I'm just not leaving. And you got to be fired. I just fired. I'm not leaving. So the leftists brought it to the Supreme Court, together with this Attorney General who's out of control. And the concern is maybe the Supreme Court is going to rule that he doesn't have to leave. That would be like Trump could not fire James Comey. And then Netanyahu is trying to fire the Attorney General. They've been trying to do it for 5 years, but they really got into it the last year or 2. And they can't get rid of her. It's like if Trump was trying to get rid of Jeff Sessions to bring in Bill Barr. You can't get rid of him. They won't let you. First of all, imagine if Jeff Sessions said, well, I'm not going to leave. You appointed me, and I'm here to stay. And then they go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, who do you think you are, Hitler? He's there to stay. That is a deep state where the guy can't even run his own government that the people elected him to run. So this is a little clip. One of the things is that the Israeli FBI, the Shin Bet, is extreme left, extreme left wing. People think, remember how when the FBI stuff came up with James Comey and all those people in the beginning of the first Trump administration with the Russian collusion, and then there was the boyfriend and girlfriend, and the boyfriend said to the girlfriend, I guarantee you, don't worry, we're going to get him out. He will never make it through his first term. And how the FBI was out there trying to sabotage him. So in the same way in Israel, the FBI goes out of its way, Shin Bet, to sabotage Jews living in Judea and Samaria. The Shin Bet is in favor. What do you mean they're in favor? No one elected them. They are in favor of the 2-state solution. They believe that Judea and Samaria should be given to the Arabs, and the Arabs should be sovereign. Is that like an FBI thing too in America? Yeah, we in the FBI have decided we're against deporting people. It's not for the FBI to get. So what happened was they caught a major FBI guy in Israel, Shin Bet. They caught a guy on a secret phone or wire talking about how, yeah, we arrest the Jews in Judea, Samaria anytime we want to. They're a bunch of schmucks. That's his word. He's talking Hebrew, so he calls them shmukim. Shmukim. They're a bunch of shmukim, and we arrest them whenever we want. So that's what this is. It's very big news in Israel right now. It's not the first news in America, but our program is the main news of the week in Israel. Here we go. And we just learned about the deep state.
רוצים לעצור אותם לחקירה כמה שיותר.
We always, אנחנו תמיד רוצים לעצור אותם. We always like to arrest them for investigations, לחקירה. Just pull them out of their houses and investigate them. Tie them up for a few days in an investigation cell. This is Jews living in Judea and Samaria. Kama shioter, as much as we can. Tir'eh, ech metahel itam chakirot shabak. See how we deal with them doing our FBI Shabak investigations. Anachnu otzrim et hashmokim ha'ela. We arrest those schmucks, gam b'li ra'ayot, even without evidence or grounds to arrest them, lakama yamim, for several days.
טוב, תראה איך מתנהל איתם חקירות שב"כ, אנחנו עוצרים את השמוקים האלה גם בלי ראיות לכמה ימים.
טוב, תן לי לראות.
שים אותם בתאי מעצר, עם מחבלים.
צבטתי את עצמי כששמעתי מי הדובר, עם מי הוא מדבר ועל מי.
אחי, קרא אותם על זה.
So this became a big, this is Kan Chadashot, this is the national public broadcaster, Channel 11. This is their story on this explosion. We'll see how that plays out. So you're the first people to know about it, other than the poor Shmokim who've been arrested and put through investigations by their FBI. Imagine being arrested and held for 3 days without any grounds, no charges, no evidence, and just randomly investigated. For what? We'll just ask you questions for 3 days, see if anything slips out.
תאמין לי,
אני לא יכול
שזה בטיפול לשכת ראש שב"כ, עם מחבלים.
And as we do see these operations, and we're seeing the IDF issue new evacuation warnings, Ariel, they issue a map every time, and something that you've noticed from this map is a almost hazy part of the map right near the Israel-Gaza border that looks like a buffer zone from your analysis.
Oh, it is a buffer zone. The IDF is confirming. Now, looking at the IDF's latest evacuation notices to the residents of various areas of the Gaza Strip, be it the north, the south, or even the center we saw today in Judea, it is evident that Israel is actively working to shrink the territory of the Gaza Strip, what Yaakov called a chokehold, pushing the civilian population to the central and coastal regions. Now, if we can see on the screen right now, the areas in the latest maps issued by IDF spokesperson in Arabic, Avichai Drei, colored in white. These this is the IDF's buffer zone, considered to be completely under Israeli military control. This is what the IDF has confirmed to me. However, the IDF refused to divulge what percentage of Gaza's territory the buffer zone constitutes. But just looking at the maps, which doesn't include the Marag corridor, and
So basically what he's saying is this was part of populated Gaza, but is not anymore. They're shrinking Gaza. They're shrinking civilian Gaza. This is theirs now, pushing everybody in. They're trying to get the hostages back and to end Hamas.
everything south of that would already be constituted as the buffer zone. We're talking about extensive territory, many kilometers deep, estimated in dozens of percent. Now, Israeli Defense Minister...
Okay, we'll move forward because of time. Okay. I'm going to be really careful now because there's some stuff I cannot show you because it's too horrific to look at. Number one, Hamas gunmen executed by Gaza clan. There's now a certain kind of breakdown. The way the Arabs in Gaza are governed, on the one hand, Hamas runs the place. And on the other hand, there are Arab clans. These go back, in many cases, decades and centuries. Families, clans. Think of Hatfields and McCoys, only Gazan Arabs. And just as Hatfields and McCoys would kill each other from eastern Kentucky and western West Virginia, members of the clans now, in some cases, are disgusted with what's going on, and some are going around now starting to kill Hamas people. And then Hamas kills some of them. And the last week or two, we showed some street rallies in Gaza against Hamas. And this week, Hamas has started killing people whose faces were evident at the street rallies against them or who posted on social media. And for better or worse, some of this stuff has pictures of people so badly mauled that I'm going to watch to make sure I don't get that on. Okay, that's a Hamas guy, and that's his last moments. Okay, you get the idea of that. So that's a Hamas operative, not just a Hamas guy, but like a major Hamas guy, and the Klan is taking him and killing him. So they now have internally, you don't hear in America, but they now have internally part of the chaos is breaking down more. And this next one is the one where they kill. And this is they're starting to execute. That was the protesters we saw last night. And now they're killing them. The one thing they all have in common, today's theme, no famine. That's Allahu Akbar, that's their thing. I'm going to go to the next thing now. There's actually pictures of how they tortured this. It's unbelievable. I had to stop watching myself.
A return to the tit-for-tat exchange of fire between Israel and Lebanon.
We were at home at 3 a.m. We were sleeping. We heard a woo sound.
Okay, so we're moving up north to Lebanon. We've covered Gaza. We covered Judea and Samaria. We covered...
And a powerful strike hit.
Overnight, the IDF struck a building in the Dahia region of southern Beirut, a suburb known for being the hub of Hezbollah operatives. This is the second strike on Beirut in a week, the first such attacks since the signing of the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire in November 2024.
Again, not just bombing in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, where Hezbollah is, but actually bombing the capital city of Beirut. It's the second time they've bombed in Beirut since the ceasefire broke down.
The IDF said in a statement that the attacks targeted a Hezbollah terrorist who had been working with Hamas, assisting them in planning a, quote, imminent terror attack against Israeli civilians. Later on Tuesday morning, the IDF confirmed that the strike killed Hassan Badir, the Hezbollah Palestinian Affairs Minister, and a man who the IDF claim is in the Iranian Quds Force. According to
the way they reported,
to the Lebanese Health Ministry, 4 people were killed in the strike. The attack came as a surprise to many as, unlike previous IDF strikes on Beirut, there was no prior warning from the IDF urging its citizens to evacuate the area. Hezbollah officials...
So that's an improvement also. They historically send out warnings like a half a day or an hour or two before they attack, which gives everybody the opportunity to get out. Now we go to America's universities. A lot of stuff this week. First, we'll... Here we go, Columbia, stand Columbia.
Columbia University's embattled interim president Katrina A. Armstrong is stepping down amid massive pressure from the Trump administration to crack down on anti-Semitic pro-Hamas actions on campus. Well, the face of the pro-Israel movement at Columbia, Shai Davidai, joins us now. Shai, what were your initial thoughts when you heard this news?
Well, thank you for having me back again. And I have to tell you, I was extremely surprised. The news actually came in true Columbia fashion on Friday afternoon because they want to make it clear that we don't get at the media circle, right? Because by Monday there's new news, and I'm glad that you're covering it. But Friday afternoon, right before Shabbat, all of a sudden I hear that she's stepping down. This is the second president to have stepped down in less than a year. That doesn't bode well for the university.
So why do you think this is happening?
Well, for the past 7 months, interim President Armstrong was unable to take the helm and actually enact the things that need to be enacted on campus.
For time reasons, we'll move forward, but another one bit the dust at Columbia. They're just going through them like slicing watermelon. Okay.
Much, my friend.
Thank you so much, and let's hope for some good news.
This morning, the Trump administration says it's now looking into funding.
We go to Harvard.
For Harvard University following reports of anti-Semitism at the school. Education Secretary Linda McMahon says that the university has failed to protect students from anti-Semitism and is promoting divisive ideologies. She added that if Harvard makes changes to its policies, its funding would not be impacted. The department says that Columbia University agreed earlier last month to a set of Trump administration demands, meaning that the school would no longer lose its funding. Those demands included an overhaul of protest rules and a review of certain teachings in the Middle East.
The Trump administration announced it will conduct a comprehensive review of Harvard University's federal contracts, citing concerns over alleged anti-Semitism and discrimination against Jewish students on campus. 3 federal departments, the Department of Education, General Services Administration, and Health and Human Services, will scrutinize $255.6 million in Harvard contracts and $8.7 billion in multi-year grants. This action follows a similar crackdown on Columbia University, where the administration recently revoked $400 million in federal funding amid accusations of permitting anti-Semitic harassment linked to pro-Palestinian activism. Critics argue these moves represent an effort to silence pro-Palestinian voices and undermine academic freedom, accusing the administration of exaggerating claims of anti-Semitism to impose political control over universities. Free speech organizations have criticized the measures as threats to academic freedom, describing the administration's demands, such as adopting specific anti-Semitic.
Anybody who has taught in the universities knows there's no academic freedom or free speech for professors or others who are conservative. They keep people out of the universities that can't become professors. They're denied tenure if they're conservative. When a person who's conservative applies for a professorship, they go through the resume, they look at the person's previously published law review or other articles in professional journals. If they see that the previous published articles are conservative, those individuals do not get hired. So the subject of free speech, like so many other things, it's often said that if it weren't for double standards, liberals would have no standards at all. The double standards of talking about First Amendment rights and free speech never had been given to the other side, and that's what they're talking about. But there's $9 billion with a B on the table that's being looked at for Harvard.
Anti-Semitism definitions and restricting protests as chilling to open discourse. The Harvard Law faculty expressed concerns in an open letter about punishing lawful speech.
Remember, the Harvard Law faculty are all leftists. In order to have gotten a job, if you're right-wing, they wouldn't have hired you. And this is true of all these schools. So the schools are 95% or more leftist faculty. So when you then hear that an open letter by the faculty, it implies some kind of balanced faculty, some on the left, some on the right, a lot in the center, and an overall concern by academicians. When you start to realize that the faculty are all left-wing, I went to UCLA Law School back in 90 to 93. I can tell you Wesley Lieber and Grant Nelson were the two conservatives on the entire, everybody knew. In other words, you had a faculty of how many hundreds of people and how many scholars, how many hundreds of, and everybody knew Wesley Lieber and Grant Nelson are the only two professors at UCLA Law School who are conservative. Today, there is one and only one professor in all of UCLA Law School who is conservative. Everyone knows who he is, and that's one. I don't want to mention his name, but that's the only one. He's actually a friend of mine, and he's the only one of the entire faculty who's not a leftist. And how do they know? Because they look at the books these guys have written, they look at the articles they've published in journals, and then when you apply for a job, they tell you, we don't need somebody with your specialty, namely conservatism.
Asserting it undermines constitutional rights.
Constitutional rights.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Tanaka with a WBZ News update. Well, Harvard University has gotten a letter from the Trump administration recommending measures to fight anti-Semitism on campus or risk losing billions of dollars in federal funding. The school's student newspaper, the Harvard Crimson, posted the letter in full on its website. In it, the White House's anti-Semitism task force called on Harvard to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and implement merit-based admissions and hiring policies. It also calls on the school to fully cooperate with the Department of Homeland Security in order to keep its nearly $9 billion in federal funding. Harvard says it's committed to tackling anti-Semitism on campus. And Brown University also at risk of losing federal funding over its handling of campus anti-Semitism. More than $500 million.
Brown is in Providence, Rhode Island.
Dollars in grants and contracts are at stake depending on the findings of the Trump administration's task force. Well, the Jewish community in Franklin and the community at large shocked by two acts of hate. Police say the crimes may be connected. Between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, investigators say a swastika was painted on a sidewalk. Red paint was also splashed on and around a We Stand With Israel sign on the town's only Jewish house of worship. The president of Temple Eitz Chaim says the Jewish community in Franklin really feels violated.
It's hard to believe that something like that would be coincidental. It's left some people feeling, very vulnerable, very scared.
Go forward for time reasons. Okay, that was quick.
A Cornell University student, Mamadou Tall, has...
Okay, that was quick. Birzeit University, B-I-R-Z-E-I-T. B-I-R-Z-E-I-T. Birzeit University is in Judea, Samaria, what the Arabs call Palestinian territory. And it's a radical pro-terror university where if in America they teach kids to be leftists, in there they use their university to teach people to be terrorists. And Harvard, their health school, had an exchange and cooperative program with Birzeit University. And now that Washington, D.C. is looking at Harvard, they just broke off the relationship with Birzeit. But in other words, until now, until they were told that they may lose $90 billion, they had not been so concerned. Now, last week we went over this guy, Cornell University, Mamadou Tall, whoever, last week, he's from Gambia. He led anti-Israel demonstrations. He's an illegal. And last week, when the Trump administration and Secretary of State Rubio announced we're throwing him out, he said he's going to stay and fight. And this week he announced he's leaving.
Has decided to leave the United States voluntarily after his student visa was revoked due to his participation in pro-Palestinian campus demonstrations. Tall, a doctoral candidate in Africana Studies, was accused by U.S. government officials of engaging in disruptive...
Isn't that weird? An African in Gambia comes to the United States to study African studies. Like, I would get it if a Jew wants to do Jewish studies and it's offered it his or her American university, but wants to take Jewish studies in Israel. I get that. But the idea that someone who's getting Africana studies doctorate has to come to America for the Africana studies and can't get it where he's doing it, and he comes here and he spends his time trying to rile up his campus university into anti-Jewish riots.
Protests, violating university policies, and creating a hostile environment for Jewish students. Tall, who is a dual citizen of the United Kingdom and the Gambia, faced backlash for comments he made online following a Hamas attack on Israel that resulted in over 1,200 fatalities. He expressed support for the resistance of colonized peoples and praised their efforts. After being instructed to surrender to immigration.
So understand, very important, because they keep emphasizing First Amendment free speech. What did he do? He simply said he supports Hamas and their efforts. He was just talking. Free speech. It happens to be that under American law, the United States does not allow in people who express support for terrorism. Well, what about free speech? Under American law, the Constitution does, and its First Amendment Bill of Rights does not apply to non-American citizens. They never tell you this in the news reports. But when they're always yelling about, well, what about my free speech? What about my First Amendment? It doesn't apply to you. You're not an American citizen. But I have a green card. You're not an American citizen. But I have a student visa. You're not an American citizen. You have none of those rights. We don't want people in our country who are going to use free speech and talking to get people all riled up. We have enough Americans to do that. We don't need to bring people like you in. And it's that simple. Rubio has announced he's throwing already 300 people have lost their student visas.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Toll sought a court order to prevent his deportation. However, U.S. District Judge Elizabeth Coombe denied his request, as well as his plea to stop the enforcement of 2 presidential executive orders targeting international students involved in pro-Palestinian activism. Hall expressed his concerns about personal safety and the likelihood of a favorable court ruling. He stated on social media that he no longer felt safe walking the streets without fear of being detained.
I mean, he no longer felt safe walking the streets. You've got Jews for a year and a half crying on TV that college after college, Jews are getting beaten up and they don't feel safe. And now this guy doesn't feel safe. So he's back to Gambia. Enjoy yourself.
Cornell University PhD student Mamadou Tall has left the United States after his visa was revoked amid heightened scrutiny of pro-Palestine activists. Tall, a dual citizen of Gambia and the UK, was originally threatened with suspension last fall for participating in a campus demonstration advocating for Palestine. Although Cornell allowed him to remain enrolled after significant public outcry, the situation escalated following the Trump administration's crackdown on foreign activists following the recent conflict in Gaza. On March 15, Tall's visa was cancelled by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, prompting him to announce his departure for safety. In a statement shared on social media, Tall expressed his disappointment, but also emphasized his need to rest and process the situation.
And now Princeton.
The Trump administration has suspended numerous federal grants to Princeton University, continuing financial cuts to elite Ivy League schools. Princeton's president, Christopher L. Eisgruber, informed the community that several dozen grants are affected, though the reasons remain unclear. He reaffirmed the university's commitment to comply with the law and uphold academic freedom. The suspended grants include support from the Department of Defense, Energy, and NASA, following similar actions against Columbia and the University of Pennsylvania.
Just to keep up with the scorecard now.
Tom Ellsworth, the BizDoc.
Just keeping up with the scorecard today, we have covered Columbia, Harvard, Cornell, Princeton. It's now spreading across the country. The media doesn't cover everything as much as Columbia because Columbia is in New York and Harvard is Harvard. But it's starting to spread. They're in office 2 months now, and they've gone past the first level of their earthquake politically of what they're doing in all kinds of areas. And for example, on the matter of colleges and anti-Semitism, now they're really stepping up their game. Now they're extending from college to college, and they're starting with the Ivy League because that gets the most attention, most prominent schools, and it's the most amount of money. $210 million to Princeton.
Diving into education news this week as another college is in trouble with the federal government and President Trump. This time it's Princeton, who didn't want to pull back from actually enabling, apparently, according to the facts we're seeing here, and allowing certain groups to protest on campus and to go from being merely support the Palestinians, there's people that are suffering in the war in Gaza.
Number one, there's no such thing as Palestinians. And number two, the report, just as I said a moment ago, they're not going to be arresting or doing this to people who are walking around with signs lawfully. What they're dealing with is, first of all, illegals who don't have those rights by definition, and even legals, legal student visas and even green cards, they don't have the rights of American citizens who are uniquely protected in certain parts of the Constitution. Non-Americans do not have those rights in this country. Never did. They're simply enforcing what Biden-Harris and Obama did not. But that's the law of the land. And so they're talking here about $210 million. And let's not forget, remember the encampments? Like, no one's talking about free speech. How about you can't move anywhere on the entire campus because you have those encampments and those tents everywhere? That's called not just free speech, that's trespass. In some cases, it's assault.
MSNBC is still losing their minds over President Trump winning 4 days later. Take a look.
Whiteness is under threat. The demographic shifts. The country isn't what all of these racially ambiguous children.
First of all, this guy's completely nuts. Second of all, people voted for Trump because they want lower groceries and a chance at buying their first home.
This is a Princeton professor.
Hey, a lot of people voted because their life's too damn expensive. And it was here and
Bingo. Their lives are too expensive. That's it. The American people want stability and a bright future. President Trump promised both.
All right. San Diego, UC San Diego.
And the Trump administration's immigration crackdown is hitting.
So that is significant because it's moving from the East Coast to the West Coast and to a less important university on the West Coast. Here on the West Coast, the main universities would include Berkeley, Stanford, UCLA, and USC. So by going after UC San Diego, it's not a nothing place. It's actually one of the best places in the country for a lung transplant, as I learned, but they're just not major league in the way that we were talking about Columbia, Harvard, Cornell, and Princeton. But now it's going there.
International students at UC San Diego. So far, 6 students with foreign visas have been impacted. Our Jennifer Franco is at the campus in La Jolla and has the latest on the situation.
Good evening. Over the past couple weeks, we've seen numerous outlets report on similar actions at colleges and universities across the nation, and now it is happening here locally. A notice was sent out to the entire UCSD campus yesterday.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'm having such a great time. I don't want to go back home.
Kaz Muniesa is enjoying his year studying abroad at UC San Diego. The French native is pursuing computer science on an F1 visa. It allows international students to enter the U.S. for the purpose of studying at colleges and universities.
Student visa it's a glorified tourist visa. So it's a privilege that you're being allowed to come into the United States.
Immigration law attorney Saman Nasseri says the federal government can revoke student visas at its discretion.
If you ever had an arrest, even if no charges were filed, that can be a reason to get your student visa revoked.
5 UCSD students had their F1 visas terminated, quote, without warning, according to a campus-wide notice from the chancellor's office Friday. The notice states, quote, the federal government has not explained the reasons behind these terminations. It adds, quote, 1 student was detained at the border, denied entry, and deported to their home country. All 6 students' country of origin remains unclear.
More commonly, what we're seeing right now is students who are protesting, whose beliefs or behaviors are not aligned with the U.S.'s. And so they're being deemed as a security risk or a national risk.
Thousands of San Diego students rallied on their college campuses last May, voicing opposition to the Gaza war.
It's really stressful. I remember some of our friends went to Mexico for spring break. I don't know, maybe coming from the Middle East or from countries where there's more tension with the U.S., it might be more stressful to cross the border.
Late last month, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said during a press conference the State Department has revoked 300 or more student visas.
We gave you a visa to come and study and get a degree, not to become a social activist that tears up our university campuses.
In a statement, the UC Office of the President notes it's aware of the situation and is, quote, committed to doing what we can to support all members of our community as they exercise their rights under the law. To you.
When a protester was caught on video in January at a New York anti-Israel rally, only her eyes were visible between a mask and headscarf. But days later, photos of her entire face, along with her name and employer, were circulated online.
I mean, if they're wearing masks, they're trying to hide. But then you ask yourself, oh, well, if you're proud of yourself and you don't think you're doing anything illegal, then why are you hiding your face?
A technology company claimed it.
There was a lot of news that started breaking out the last week. So it's good to know about. There are two organizations in America, Jewish organizations, that have started reporting to the United States government the names of anti-Israel people in the country who are here on student visas and with other kinds of visas. One of them is Canary Mission. You can look them up online. Canary Mission has been around for many years. They're secretive. No one knows who they are, who's donating to them. They're amazing. They remain non-tax exempt so that they don't have to disclose the names of their donors. And you should go on the Canary Mission website, and they list like every anti-Semite in America, particularly those at universities. They break it down by university. They have pictures, the names, the bios. Basically, any professor in this country who's an anti-Semite, and any student at a university who's an anti-Semite, is probably on Canary Mission's website. And they're giving a lot of the information they have to the government. And another is the group Beitar, the Zionist group, Zionist college and teenage group Beitar. It's an organization that goes back 100 years to the days of Zev Jabotinsky. The Irgun came out of the Beitar, etc. In my day, I was a member of Beitar, and Beitar has been going around, likewise, doing research, finding any anti-Israel person in the United States who's here on a visa, sending it to the government. And a number of those people have been deported. And so the New York Times and Washington Post and the other liberal new media have started doing all kinds of stuff about these two terrible organizations that are just not American. They're very American. So anyway, this is a third guy. Here's a guy with a yarmulke, from guy, technology, and they're going into the faces, even faces with masks, and they're identifying them and getting the information to the government. Jews fighting back. The empire fights back.
Its new facial recognition tool had identified the woman despite the coverings.
I began working on facial recognition model because every other facial recognition model that we know of has failed at finding.
Isn't this the greatest program of the week?
Them with their masks on.
The same software was also used to review images taken during months of pro-Palestinian marches at U.S. colleges, and a list of names were submitted to President Donald Trump's administration, urging that the protesters be deported in accordance with his call for the expulsion of foreign students who participated in pro-jihadist protests. The efforts to identify protesters using facial recognition has stirred anxiety among foreign students, worried that activism could jeopardize their legal status.
I am nervous for my peers who are protesting, but to be honest, I also think it's really pathetic. It's really pathetic that someone thinks that they have to take on this vigilante role of exposing people.
So I think at the end of the day, these are just scare tactics in order to get people to stop talking about Palestine, and that will never happen.
Since the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia University student who helped lead demonstrations, concern about the pursuit of activists has risen.
I suddenly feel like we're being forced to think about our survival We're being forced to think about what it means for us to give our time, our energies into this university, into this country, and rethinking all of that in a way that makes me extremely sad and scared.
Well before Khalil's arrest, the unearthing and spreading of personal information had become commonplace. Known as doxing, the practice has been used to expose both activists in the US and Israeli soldiers who recorded themselves on the battlefield.
People have been doxxed and harassed, and they've used tools of the institution. Now they're using tools of the state to actually go after people.
But the stakes have now been raised as requests to report demonstrators to immigration officials increase the use of facial recognition technology by private groups into a territory that was previously largely reserved for law enforcement.
If you're here causing civil unrest, assaulting faculty members, assaulting people on the streets, chanting for people's death, why the heck did you come to this country? Foreigners, I think they should be deported if they participate in acts of violence.
Viewers of 60 Minutes were shocked after reporter Leslie Stoll bizarrely appeared to make excuses for Hamas during an interview.
This also has been a big thing. CBS 60 Minutes last week or 2 weeks ago, Leslie Stoll was interviewing an Israeli hostage who had been released and was asking him about what went on. And the guy starts talking about how Hamas was starving these people to death, the hostages. They starved them, they emaciated them. And Leslie Stahl, who has a record of being anti-Israel and weak on Israel, comes back as the reporter saying, well, maybe the reason they didn't give you money, food, is because they didn't have food for themselves either.
Interview with a freed Israeli hostage.
The terrorists became very mean and very cruel and violent.
More so? Much more so.
They were beating me and starving me.
Do you think they starved you or they just didn't have food?
No, I think they starved me and they...
This has become a big, big thing. Just for time, we'll go forward with all the outrage. This report goes on for 5 minutes with outrage from around the country over that comment that she made. Do you think that they starved you, or do you think that they just didn't have
me and starving me?
Do you think they starved you or they just didn't have food?
No, I think they starved me and they would often eat in front of me and not offer me food.
Fox News hosts blasted Stoll for the tone-deaf question.
These individuals show up gaunt. They have been tortured in horrific fashion. Was it just that Hamas didn't have food? Leslie Stahl, what's in your drinking water?
I don't know, but didn't she notice that the hostage takers weren't emaciated?
No.
Tension mounts on Speedway as Wednesday's Israel block party begins to unfold.
You want to be a big martyr and big shot, don't you? No, I don't. You're nobody.
While multiple officials with Texas Hillel declined to speak with TSTV News, a press statement written prior to the block party says this annual event is meant to celebrate Israeli culture and history.
Take a picture.
This is at the University of Texas.
But this protester tells us it instead represents erasure of the Palestinian identity.
The poppy flower, for many years, it was used.
There is no Palestinian identity. There's no such thing as Palestinians.
As a flower and a symbol of resistance for the Palestinian people. And this year, it's like the face of their block party.
In previous years, the Palestine Solidarity Committee organized here in front of the McCollum School of Business, directly across from the block party tent. But this year, they moved over to the intersection by 21st Street and Speedway, then passing by Hillel in protest.
They can have that expressive activity, they can enjoy their First Amendment rights, and we can do that safely.
To see the university allow them to continue to do this and take up so much space while we're confined to this little corner. There's just unfair treatment all around.
Places, a hospital in Oregon. Listen, we're not going to report on every Jew-hating troll on the internet, but in instances like this where it could potentially lead to physical harm, well, then we have to talk about it. Kamisha Hart, a nurse at the Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, was fired for her abhorrently anti-Semitic comments on social media. Some of her comments include, quote, "I would refuse to treat you. I don't take care of animals, dogs, rats, vermin of any kind. And I would never treat you anyway. I would refuse because I'm not a vet and I don't treat dogs. This clearly jeopardizes the well-being and safety of Jewish patients at this hospital. And I think it's important that all of these reports of anti-Semitism from Australia to the UK to now Oregon, that they don't just become white noise. And when we see the hatred of the Jewish people start to rise up again, it's incumbent upon you, it's incumbent upon me. And maybe you feel a little powerless to do anything about it, but I want to encourage you that your voice really can make a difference. So
the latest on the deadly tragedy in Brooklyn yesterday. Mourners gathered today to pay their respects to the mother and her 2 young children, killed when an out-of-control driver slammed into a group of pedestrians in Midwood.
Police charged that driver with manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. An exclusive video obtained by Eyewitness News shows her car speeding moments before the crash.
Eyewitness News reporter Lucy Yang has the story.
The Hasidic community in mourning for a 34-year-old mother and 2 of her young children.
She was moral and ethical and raised her children in the most elite manner, according to our Torah.
Saturday afternoon, Natasha Sada and her children were walking to a relative's house, as seen in this exclusive video, when their steps were tragically cut short. Natasha, her daughters, 8-year-old Diana and 5-year-old Deborah, would not survive the accident. Her 4-year-old son, now in critical condition.
The children were delicious angels, well brought up and well raised.
Police say this Audi, believed to be speeding, crashed into a Toyota at the intersection of Ocean Parkway and Quinton Road in the Midwood section of Brooklyn, then hit the pedestrians before flipping over. Authorities add the driver of the Audi, 32-year-old Miriam Yerimi, never should have been driving.
With 93 violations, with $10,000 of unpaid fines.
And a suspended license.
With a suspended license, that is correct, yes.
Yerimi, hospitalized in stable condition, has now been charged with 3 counts of manslaughter and 3 counts of criminally negligent homicide. In the Toyota was a 63-year-old Uber driver and his passengers, including 3 children. They are all listed in stable condition. As for the pedestrians who had no protection.
Beautiful people, kind people, charitable people. Very unfortunate.
Sada's husband and baby were home at the time of the accident. We're told plans are to fly the bodies to Israel for burial. In Brooklyn, Lucy Yang, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Okay, so let's just make a note here. Let me just. Okay. I want to thank everybody for being with us. I am going to play Vi'i She'amda since we're moving into Pesach and the Haggadah and the Seder. So I am going to play Vi'i She'amda, but I want to give you a chance because there was just so much material and you may have to run right now. So I've got Vi'i She'amda. We'll have class Tuesday. Please forward the link to anyone you think would be interested in this. And it's been a very, very, very busy week. And there's just so much material, and God's just watch over us. Bless the people of Israel. This week, give an extra blessing to the people of Hungary for being on our side, and give an extra blessing for those people working with the high technology and face recognition and help drive all those people out. So anyway, have a wonderful week.
She'amda
Thanks again for being here and have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.